Welcome, everyone, the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. My name is Jackie Croshoe, and I am enrolled in the Turtle Mountain Band in North Dakota, and I will be helping with today's webinar. We are excited to have you join us all today, and this webinar will be facilitated by our Capacity Building Center for Tribes partners. They are the National Native Children's Trauma Center, so we have a couple of the staff with us today. They will discuss practical trauma-informed strategies for tribal child welfare supervisors and programs that are grounded in our cultural values. Before we get started, and I see that some of you are, thank you, Sarah, I would love for you just to continue telling us who you are, the tribe, your name, and we can kind of see who's with us today, and we can talk to our peers. And please use the chat room how you feel safe, how you feel comfortable talking to your peers, asking us questions. But go ahead and use that as however you want today. And while you're doing that, I just want to remind everyone that this is a two-part series. So today is part one, maintaining clear roles and realistic expectations within tribal child welfare programs. And one of the things that we will learn today is just the foundational and tangible tips and strategies that can be utilized to enhance or develop culturally responsive and trauma-informed supervision based on the 6 principles of trauma-informed care. And those are the safety, the trust, the culture and history, empowerment, peer support, and collaboration. So we're going to hear more about that today. And just to give you a little heads up, part 2 is the essential needs for adaptive leadership and reflective practice among tribal child welfare professionals. I know those are big titles, but we will be sure to get all of this in writing. And that will be held on Thursday, May 18th. And I encourage you, if you have not yet done so, to go ahead and register for that. And I believe Sarah is going to put that registration link in the chat room for the part 2 series. So now I don't want to take up any more time. I want to introduce you to Esther Ann, and she is just going to walk us through a grounding activity. So Esther.
Thank you, Jackie. So just to get us started, I invite you to please sit comfortably in your chair, your back nice and straight, your hands placed comfortably in your lap, and your feet planted squarely on the floor. Take a deep breath in and let it out with a sigh. Now I invite you to close your eyes or to simply lower and soften your gaze. Become aware of your environment, what's around you, the light coming through your eyelids, the sounds, the smells, the sense of space, the air touching your skin. Acknowledge where you are. You are here now. Let's turn our awareness inward to our bodies. Become aware of the back of your thighs resting comfortably on the seat of your chair. Feel the chair against your muscles and know you are supported. Pay some loving attention to your spine. Your backbone is flexible and responsive. Imagine a thread of light extended from the top of your spine, through the top of your head and up into the cosmos, disappearing into the stars. Remember, you are connected to all that is, and you are supported. Be aware of your breath in your abdomen, and be aware of the gentle rise and fall of your belly. Take one big cleansing breath in and release it with a sigh, letting go of any tensions in your body. They are free to leave. Smile as you breathe because you are here now. Become aware of your feet. Bring your thoughts into your feet. Notice your feet and feel how you are supported by the floor beneath you. Bring your attention to that floor. Imagine how it stretches out around you to touch the walls of the building and how those walls extend downward into the ground, the firm foundation resting deeply in the rich soils of Mother Earth. Imagine the earth underneath your building, how it feels, how it smells. Breathe in knowing you are supported upon this earth. Let your mind flow back hundreds, thousands of years past and imagine this earth as your ancestors knew it here in that beautiful place. Imagine the wind, the sun, the rain, how the trees sway, the tides rise and fall. Imagine the joy, the laughter, and the love. Breathe out, knowing you are connected to the earth, to all creation, and to all humanity. You are connected to your ancestors. We are connected to each other and connected to future generations. Become aware once again of your whole body, resting comfortably in your chair, your feet on the floor, the light against your eyelids. Become aware of the space around you, the sounds, the smell, the air on your skin. When you feel ready, move your body as it prepares to wake up, relaxed and energized. Slowly open your eyes and come out of the meditation, carrying only the good energy with you. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And now I want to turn it over to Kimee Wind-Hummingbird and Lisa Stark. Kimee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stongo, Kimee Wind-Hummingbird Jahojipkados. My name is Kimee. I'm Muskogee, and I'm joining you today from my tribal community in Oklahoma. I have been with the National Native Children's Trauma Center for 2 years now, but prior to that, I worked for 22 years in Indian child welfare. So that's all I know is working within my tribal community and keeping children connected to, first and foremost, their family and each other, and to their community and to their nation and to their values and traditions. So I just want to thank you for joining us today. I know you could have been anywhere else in the world today. So thank you for giving us an hour of your time today. And I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to introduce herself.
Buju Ginoa, Sagamakwa Indigo Ojibwe Magazine Dode, Mashkizi Bing Dunjaba. My name is Lisa. I am Eagle Clan, and I am a member of the Bad River Ojibwe from northern Wisconsin, right on the lake shores of Lake Superior. I have been with National Native Children's Trauma Center as a training and technical assistant for, I think I'm starting 4 years. It's been going so wonderfully. It's kind of a blur. It goes fast. But before that, I have a background in tribal child welfare. I have master's in social work, which focus primarily in child welfare, specifically in Indian country. And I'm currently living in Missoula, and I have worked as a supervisor, and I know Kimee has as well. So we are very happy to be here today, and thank you for joining us.
Next slide, please. I think a couple of slides. Lisa, I think you're.
I have to remember to unmute. So today we will be talking about how to have trauma-informed supervision, more specifically in tribal child welfare or child welfare settings. And we will be talking a lot about the 6 principles of trauma-informed supervision and how we can bring those into our tribal nations, our tribal communities, and learn how to develop, our responses to our communities and our issues and our concerns, and really helping our young ones in a culturally responsive way. We will also be talking about how the strategies of what we can do to maintain clear roles, along with the 6 principles, kind of following those, and realistic expectations for caseworkers and those that they manage. And how our job descriptions, and we'll even talk about how policies and procedures can actually be tools in providing trauma-informed care, and we'll talk more in depth about that as well. Next slide. I just wanted to open this with a quote from Brené Brown. If you haven't heard from her, I am a huge fan. She's actually a professor of social work, but she has written many books. She is probably most well known for, I think she was on Oprah, but she's done many TED Talks as well. But she does a lot of talk about leadership and what it really means in our society. And what I really love about her is she's just really authentic, and she is really real about, like what her missteps have been and just talking about those. But just this quote brings what we are talking about today, and how to have trauma-informed supervision using the 6 principles so that we can create a safe culture where people can feel safe, heard, seen, and respected.
Thanks, Lisa. So we know that children and families in the child welfare system experience high rates of trauma, but we also need to point out that with appropriate supports and interventions, people can overcome traumatic experiences. At the center, we talk a lot about the protective factors that we see within our communities that show our resilience. There's not a better example of resilience than our nations. We've had to learn to survive and adapt and prosper and grow within our tribal communities. We're truly beautiful examples of resilience in the face of the historical trauma that our nations have seen. So before we talk about trauma-informed care today, I think it's important that we define trauma. At the center, we stick closely to the definition that SAMHSA uses as we discuss trauma-informed care. So when we're talking about individual trauma, it's the result from an event or a series of events or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening and has lasting adverse effects on the individual's mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And then we can talk about the 3 E's of trauma. So those refer to the event and the circumstances that led to the individual's experience of the event and the long-lasting effects. So we're looking at the event itself, the experience, and then the effects that it has on the individual. And then that leads us into talking about trauma, a trauma-informed approach. And that's when an organization realizes the widespread impact that trauma has and understands the paths to recovery. The organization also recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients and families, their staff members, and others involved with the system. And they respond by integrating a trauma-informed practice within their policies and procedures. And by doing this, the organization intentionally seeks to resist re-traumatization. So there's lots of 3 E's and some 4 R's. And then that leads us right into a conversation about the 6 key principles of trauma-informed care that help guide organizations in a trauma-informed approach. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, those 6 key principles are safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural and historical and gender issues. Next slide, please. The first principle we're going to talk about today is safety. And what that looks like, it's physically and also psychologically safety for everyone, all throughout the organization, staff, and the people you serve. This approach addresses whether children or adults feel physically and psychologically safe. Emphasizing the physical setting is safe and the personal interactions with the staff promotes a sense of feeling safe. It's also important that we, as the service providers, acknowledge that safety is defined by who we serve. And in the case of today, we're talking about our tribal child welfare teams. So how do we, as supervisors, how can we support them? And in doing so, provide them with the tools they need to successfully intervene with our community members. And next, thank you. So when we're talking about trustworthiness and transparency, we should think about building and maintaining trust by transparently maintaining or making decisions and operating in that manner. Making sure that our organizational operations and the decisions we make are guided by transparency with the goal of building and maintaining trust with clients, family members, among staff, and our community partners. Next slide.
The next principle we are going to talk about is peer support. In our realm, peer support can mean different things. So when we're working with our families, often we are referring to their support system or who are their peers. Often this can be even another type of worker who has been through the tribal child welfare system and can help them navigate through the system if they're going through. Or simply can be their aunties, their cousins, whoever provides them, that much needed emotional and spiritual support. But we're also going to focus on the peer support in a professional setting, or when we're talking about our peers as coworkers. And in both of these contexts, peers can be referred to as trauma survivors. So not only are the families that you're working with experiencing trauma, but you're experiencing trauma right with them, right along with them, and walking through with it. We, as workers, we're often exposed or experiencing trauma right along with our those that we work with as well. But it's just really important to know that whatever definition we are, that having peer support is really important in trauma-informed care. Next, the other principle that we are going to talk about is number 4, which is collaboration. And in trauma-informed care principle, what we mean by collaboration is that as a supervisor, even a tribal child welfare worker, you are carrying a lot of authoritarian power. I would often tell my staff or remind them when I was supervising them that that's an extraordinary responsibility. It's not one to, focus on the ego of it. Rather, it's to be really humble about it, to wield that power to best create healing and safety for the families we are working with, for the communities we are working in, and providing, the real trauma-informed supervision. So an example of collaboration that we can do in settings and in providing trauma-informed care is really giving a lot of voice and choice, not only to your staff members in talking about like case planning or even policies or procedures when those administrative things are coming up, but with your families as well, and giving them voice and choice a lot in their collaboration of their case planning and meeting what the goals are that they need to achieve for safety of our youth. Next slide. And with the principles number 5, empowerment. I know I just talked a little bit about voice and choice, but empowerment is a really exciting aspect of trauma-informed supervision care. With empowerment, there are many strategies to use. With staff, when someone is doing something awesome or is doing something great, or even if they have reached just like an epiphany in a case or reached a goal with the family that they're working at, that they've been working at for a long time, validate it, celebrate it, give them kudos, give them, like the pats on the backs, empower them to show like their strength and what they're doing good and what they are doing right in the casework. And a lot of voice and choice historically, specifically in Indian country, unfortunately, there has not been a lot of voice and choice. Decisions have been made about our children, about our communities, a lot of times without due process, a lot of times without our consent. And our children were sent far away from our communities. So we have to recognize that there is often a distrust, specifically in human resources or social services programs, and where that comes from, and how we can be aware of it to change it, to build upon the relationships, not only with the families we're working with, but our coworkers and our peers as well. But, building the strong relationships with our communities as well, and all the other partners that we work with, whether it's with, tribal law enforcement, county law enforcement, or if you're in a jurisdiction with federal agencies, those as well, with our doctors, our lawyers, it can just expand. But this is a really exciting opportunity to also be aware of gender issues, not only providing safety in the workplace in a culture that is very accepting and inclusive, and goes along with the teachings that, a creator made a person, and that person is perfect as who they are in their authentic selves, but be able to provide the safety that they can be who they are. And those who also the populations that we are serving as well. And just being fully aware of how we can provide physical and psychological, spiritual and emotional safety of allowing people in being who they authentically are. There's a lot of opportunity with, tribal nations as sovereignty as our backbone. We get to be able to really create our own laws and adapt them and amend them in ways that fit our communities, that fit our teachings, that fit our culture and our ways of being, that is more focused on healing and resilience and the positive aspects of our communities. And we are able to bring in our culture into our policies, our procedures, how we serve our communities. I do know, I did see that there were many people from a tribe in Michigan that I worked with last summer, and they're doing really exciting things by including the 7th-generation teachings into their policies and procedures and their actual process of how they are, doing their casework and providing, that information not only to the workers when they onboard or they're coming on, but having those expectations according to those sacred teachings such as honesty, humility, those type of things, and how they treat each other and the populations they serve. I've heard of many tribal communities adapting in ways. For example, I believe it's on the Pine Ridge Reservation that if a concern is called in, they actually sent out a community advocate that is assigned to that particular community, or I think what they call Tioshpaye. I may have that wrong. Hopefully my Lakota relatives, if there are any, can correct me if I'm wrong. But I hear that they send, the person out first to see if, there's ways or creative ways that they can offer services. Let's say it's a call that a child is not going to the doctor. Maybe it's just a transportation issue. And instead of formalizing or going through a formal child welfare process, that community advocate or that community peer can actually hey, we have these resources, we can help provide transportation and meet the needs of that child and that family instead of bringing them into the full formalized system. Oh, great. I just saw I did get that right. But this is just so exciting, and why working in Indian country is just so amazing, because we get to use sovereignty and to be able to adapt into our own way. Next slide.
So before we move forward, I think we have a poll that we'd like to offer the audience. And I also want to say too that we hope this conversation is very free flowing, and we'd love to hear your insight. Thanks for spending some time with us, Renee. So yes, here's the poll is up. So if you don't mind letting us know if whether or not you're familiar with the 6 principles of trauma-informed care. And I'm not sure, is it Sarah or Esther who's running the poll? If you'll let us know when we're ready to proceed. We're happy
Yeah,
to
sure. Thanks, Kimee. It's Sarah. So let's see. Looks like we'll give just a couple more seconds for that poll. Great. I'm going to share those results with everyone. So it looks like about 54% of folks, right around half, were familiar with the 6 principles of trauma-informed care. Great. And we also would like to ask one other question to folks. Let's see. Okay, great. Did that launch? No, it didn't. Sorry. Now it did. Okay, so we would like to ask everyone, does your agency currently apply the 6 trauma-informed care principles? Getting a lot of responses coming in. We'll give it just another second.
Great.
We have a very engaged group today. Wow.
Awesome. Yes. So glad to hear that.
All right. Fantastic. So there are those results.
So it looks like a little bit of the majority is that no, you do not. And I want to offer this too. I know Lisa spoke to this, but I have been, like I said, I started working in Indian child welfare in 1999. So I have been boots on the ground all the way up, learned how programs develop and how to implement and enhance programs. And whenever I left tribal child welfare, I left as the director of children and family services. So, and I just want to offer this to those of you on the call that I wish I had the chance to learn about trauma-informed care whenever I was doing direct practice. But I know I was constantly putting out fires or responding to the needs of the families or the staff that was in front of me. And had I understood the true value of intentionally leading in a trauma-informed way, I absolutely know without a doubt, I would have responded differently to some situations. So we'd love for you to come off mute by raising your hand, click your raise a hand icon, or drop some information in the chat. We'd like to hear about what response looks like within your tribal community. And I also say this whenever we're doing some of these trainings, a lot of times tribes do have a trauma-informed response. We just may not use that term. We understand the importance of surrounding families in a way that uplifts them and provides them with support that they need to overcome obstacles. And I know that happens all day, every day in our communities. I know we just finished up basketball season, right? So how many of us gave money to the benefits that we're going to get somebody to a tournament somewhere? We have a way to support and uplift our families. And yes, Maria, I see that you have, so good to see you, or to see your face.
Hi. So there's a couple of things I was thinking about when you posed that question, and the trauma-informed approach or trauma-informed care principles, I think, can be looked at in different ways. So yes, to the approach that we have with the UNINA, or those who come to us, and also different for those that we have for the staff. So one of the things that we do is recognizing as a group, and we talk about this with the staff a lot, is that because we know that our staff are being traumatized when they go into these difficult situations with our families, that we are not expecting that the staff make decisions alone based on these situations, that we support as a group, that we put all of our heads together. They don't take the bulk of the responsibility. It's shared. The decision making is shared. At minimum of 3 people to review, cases or crisis situations that come to us. And so that way it feels like the staff demonstrate that they feel less stressed out about the decisions that are being made, more supported and have more confidence, moving forward with different situations. Because it does happen that we get too close to the case or too close to what's happening to be able to make the most rational decisions sometimes. So that's one of the ways that we approach it with our staff, to help our staff that are, boots on ground. Also, to help support our staff, we have what we call division agreements. And those are just pretty much agreements that we came up with as a whole division, and we review them every time a new person joins us on staff. So that way, they have the opportunity to provide feedback. Everything gets reviewed on whether we want to keep them the same. Do we want to add anything? Do we want to take anything out? And with that is, that respect, the requirement of safety. How do we feel safe with one another? Using I statements when we communicate about difficult situations, interpersonally, so that we can remain strong here as a team or as a division, so that we can better support our community. And so those are the things I can think of as the way we support our staff. Just right off the bat. And then it's different to the way that we approach our UNINA. So, we know that, and we talk about how we expect that our UNINA have developed certain behaviors that would seem unhealthy, unfriendly, adverse a lot of the times, because of these habits that a lot of our UNINA have picked up to be able to survive. And we recognize that it's survival, that it's not, doesn't make them a bad person. We have to see the human side of them, and not what's wrong with you, but the what happened to you idea is what we're always talking about, getting back to as a core, and to not take things personally. And so that's the approach. And then the piece about choice, we always talk about not telling our UNINA what they need to do. We talk, we can inform, we can share what we think could be possible choices, but our UNINA always have choice. And so just right off the top of my head, I know that those are some of the things that came to mind.
Thank you so much for sharing, Maria. And for this, you guys don't know, she's joining us from Kenai, Alaska. Had some amazing opportunities to connect with, and that's what we hope that this opportunity allows you as well, the ability to connect with other supervisors across Indian country, because I know what it's like to sit in your seat, and I know that it's a unique experience, but there are certain amazing initiatives that are going on across Indian country, and while it may look different in your community, maybe you can take something home with you and modify it to meet the needs of your community. So that's what we're hoping that these webinars offer. And so thank you for sharing that. I did want to kind of follow up to a couple of things that Maria said. Absolutely. The support surrounding your staff, and knowing that, if you're staffing these cases, if you have to go into a courtroom and to give testimony about some pretty challenging things sometimes in a family's life, but you can support yourself by saying, sometimes one of the questions was always posed to me, how did you come up with this recommendation? And it's like, you can say, I staffed this with my peers. And in that room, there were 15 of us or 10 of us or however many. And then what I would do is I would add up the years of service that they had. And I would say, I staffed this case with 10 of my peers. And in that room, the combined amount of experience working in Indian child welfare was, if each of them had 5 years, that's 50 years of experience right there. And that helps you feel, and, helps the weight off of your shoulders a little bit more, knowing that you've staffed that and you have that support of your team. But in addition to that, then you can go one step further, and you might hear something in that staffing that you've overlooked, that you've not thought of. And you're like, oh my gosh, I need to try that. Let's try that with this family. So that is so key. And then also, I think we'll talk a little bit about, you mentioned division agreements, and we have, and I think this could potentially be close to the similar thing that you're talking about. A little bit later in the conversation today, we'll talk about expectations of staff, and so maybe that might help shed some light on that too. Is there anything anyone else would like to offer, or anything in the chat? Okay, Vaughn says, I think the trauma-informed care principles are harder to work with when you're very limited resources in a community. You're absolutely right. But let me offer this too. And I think I said this a little bit earlier. I think in some ways we do, tribal communities, we do have a way that we respond in a trauma-informed way. But it might look different than maybe what we've said. So, Vaughn, we'd love to connect with you. And I think Jackie's going to talk a little bit about this later, but we hope to have a further discussion moving forward, maybe next month, so we can help kind of talk more about this. And I apologize, I do not want to mispronounce your name in any way, but I'll offer your comment. It says, I think awareness is important. We try to tough it out and turn a blind eye to what we see in our communities and don't realize its effect on us. Absolutely. As employees or staff that walk alongside these families that face these challenges on a daily basis, we carry that with us. We do. I mean, I'm probably not alone on this group of 155 of us whenever I say I've spent a lot of sleepless nights thinking about families and children and what I could do if I could just do one more thing to help them. You're right. We do take that home with us. And that causes a whole different set of issues for us as helpers, as service providers, and as people who really do this work because, we feel a responsibility to our people and to our communities. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else before we move forward? Okay, next slide, please. Oh, okay. So why is it important to understand my role in the team? And we're talking about tribal child welfare supervisors. They're often responsible for relaying information and decisions to caseworkers that are directed by the upper management. And we kind of talked a little bit about some of the challenging roles that supervisors play. And you're also responsible sometimes for making life-changing decisions, right? Like those sometimes are hard to let go of at 5 as well. I know that there's been a few that I've stayed up all night worrying about myself. So in addition to those challenges that we face, we also have to manage our programs, right? The ongoing duties and responsibilities of day-to-day operations within our programs. So maintaining a clear and predictable flow of information is really important, especially when you're considering the impact trauma can have on the person's ability to effectively communicate and complete required daily tasks whenever you're thinking about yourself as a supervisor, but then also your team below you. I think Lisa may have mentioned the fact that sometimes within our own, we carry some with us, I certainly didn't have a perfect childhood growing up, so I know that I have some things that I carry with me. And we didn't talk about it today, but in some of the previous trainings that we did, we talk about trauma triggers, right? We can instantly, in a moment, go back to that traumatic experience by, the smell of gasoline, or if we were in a wreck, or the smell of anything, or just a loud sudden noise. There are certain triggers that can cause us stress as a workforce itself too. And so as supervisors, we also need to recognize and address those trauma responders within our own staff and support their abilities to maintain clear roles and set realistic expectations. So next, if you can click again. So what can we do as, what's expected of me, or what can we do as a supervisor? We can verbally communicate role expectations with each staff member based on the written job descriptions that are outlined in their job vacancy, or their job opening, their job descriptions, their roles and responsibilities and duties. And then we can ensure that any assigned tasks are aligned with that staff member's official job description, their roles, responsibilities, and duties, just making sure that there aren't any surprises, right? That they know what they're expected to do as an employee, and we know what our expectation is of them as a supervisor. And then, of course, to provide and prioritize ongoing professional development opportunities for staff to build their trauma responsive skill set, so they're also better equipped to recognize when trauma might be impacting their abilities to complete the administrative tasks. Also, to be transparent in the ways that information flows between all the levels of the staff within the tribal child welfare program, and how the information gets decided on, right? And how it's passed from one person to another. So we talk about transparency. We talked about that a little bit early, trustworthy and transparency. or trustworthiness and transparency. And then we can think and reflect before passing information along. And then I always, whenever I had some new members that I welcomed to my leadership staff, I always passed around Colin Powell's. There's one that's a 13 rules of leadership document, and there's an 18 rules of leadership document. And I think we've got the 13 rules we can drop in the chat, but it talks about ways that, you know, to support your staff, or even things that you might think of as a supervisor whenever times get tough. And one of the things that I know that it mentions is it's not as bad as we think, and it'll look better tomorrow. And another one is it can be done. Just remember, it can be done. And I always think too, I like this quote. It's from a song, but she says, "For those of you who hated, you only made us more creative." I think about that all the time. We can get done. We just have to maybe find a different way to do it, but we can do it. And then check the small things. I think about this too. It's like a meme that I saw on Facebook a few years back, but it says the moment that your most passionate staff goes silent, that's a bad sign, right? Because we know those ones who are always just full of passion and want to help and connect. And when they go silent, you know something's going on. So it's important to check in with them. Also share credit. You know, I know you on your team, you probably surround yourself with people who maybe aren't like-minded with you, because you acknowledge that they have their own skill set and they have some amazing things to bring to the table. And it's always important that they feel a part of the team. And whenever they come up with this amazing idea, share the credit. And then one that I always talk to about my leadership staff is he also made a statement. I think this is in the 18 things for leadership, but he said, "The day that soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day that you've stopped leading them. They've either lost confidence in you as a leader, or they've concluded that you do not care. And either one is a failure of leadership." And I always think about that, because I know sometimes we as supervisors, we just answer questions all day long, and it can take its toll on us. And I can remember the drive home, the 30-minute drive home between the office and the home. And then as soon as you walk through that door, if you have, family at home, it's just another bombard of questions. And I can remember walking through the door and telling my kids, just give me 10 minutes, just give me 10 minutes. But I think it's important to acknowledge if they have stopped bringing their questions to you, that there might be an underlying issue there. You might need to check in with them to find out. Oh, it looks like there might be trouble with the link. And I apologize. We can send it out. If it doesn't open in the link, we can make sure that you get all the information that you need. And Lisa, I think you've got the next slide. Sorry.
I bumped my thing and I made it small. So there, full screen. So what can you do as a supervisor or in a leadership position to provide your team with tools? I am always going to be an advocate of policies and procedures. I have worked in instances where we didn't have policies and procedures specific to our department or even like our child welfare program. And when those situations occur, or you have like a huge fire or many fires on your hands, those policies and procedures become like your navigator a lot of times. They can also really help in situations where you are dealing with ethical dilemmas. We talk a lot about that in social work, where, you're really questioning how something is going, or how you should make decisions, or, there's just something going on that's creating some kind of ethical dilemma. Policies and procedures can be your kind of like your safety net. And it can also help you with providing consistency, fairness across the board. If I know that often there are a lot of times there aren't policy and procedures, and just the like taking it on, just writing them, it seems like a colossal beast, but I really encouraged you to do that. And to also really involve a lot of voice from your staff, from the other, departments you are working with. For instance, I know when we were often reviewing our policies or procedures, or even talking about making amendments to, our tribal codes or statutes or our laws, we always had to involve the attorneys, the powers that be, or even sometimes the judge, and see how it all works together and impacts, and just have those sessions of how can we brainstorm and come up with solutions and how to problem solve. Having regular supervision meetings, both individually as well as a group, is also very effective. Just being able to sit as a team and talk about, hey, this is what's going on with my case this week. And, I really don't know what to do. Does anyone else have any ideas? Or do they know of any resources that I haven't thought about? Or those can be really helpful and powerful moments. But also supervising individually, I like to actually call them like coaching moments rather than like supervision. But being able just to have that one-on-one time with your staff to let them be vulnerable, and you can be vulnerable too, and really give them, like the safety of not only the privacy of talking things through, but they can open up about what, concerns they have, whether it's in the office. Or I often had a lot of workers say, hey, this is what's going on outside of my life, and I know that it's impacting, but a lot of times they just need someone to listen and talk through and to provide the emotional support for that as well. And that's a way to make sure like what is happening outside or other influences is not biasing decision making as well. Kimee talked a little bit about that earlier, but it's really important to supervisors or leaders to keep an eye on that, and to be able to know what, how to deal with those moments when those come up, and say, I think that this may be affecting you in this way. Maybe we need a different approach, or maybe we can turn this over to Kimee, who may have an approach as well, just to be able to, keep that careful balance as well. And lastly, training opportunities. Those, I know, especially in Indian country, those can be expensive, but I think in the last few years, we have learned, Zoom, that we have learned that we can do a lot of things virtually. It may not always be the same, but we can bring those opportunities to our staff, to our communities as well. And to be able to just keep providing those opportunities, being on the lookout for what is coming up, or even if something is trending. I remember when I first started, as a social worker, things change and evolve and progress, whether or not it's because laws are changing and you're adapting to it, or there's more research on how we did it wasn't always the best. Here's a better way. So adapting to that as well. So ongoing training is always a very effective tool that you can use. Even having just like staff retreats where you get together and maybe even focus on policy and procedures and get input or feedback, or even bring it to the community and ask, hey, what is working and what isn't? What do you need to see from us that we're not hitting? What would you like us to do better? What are we doing great? Those type of interactions as well can be said as tools. Next slide. So in a lot of what we do, especially as in Indian country, we as Indian people, we like, that is how we connect, is through our relationships with each other, with our communities, even with the land, with our elders, with our youth, with our parents, whatever it is. Relationships are key. And in doing so, modeling how to treat not only our clients, or I hate that word, clients, or the people that we work with, or our relatives that we are working with, how they should be treated with, humility and respect, and really listening to the concerns, and really like working to problem solve. We can model that with our staff as well. A lot of times we have high turnover. Let's just be honest about that. And we're constantly getting, new staff and constantly having to retrain. But a lot of it can come from shadow me and just see and be a good role model of how to be a good relative when we are working with those that we are working with or serving in our community. Also, to have an understanding that trauma is a human experience. And we need to be aware of not only how trauma affects us individually, just as yourself, but our staff as well. And it can come from outside forces. I know, like, I'm just going to be a little vulnerable. Like within the last couple of years, I recently lost my dad. And it brings up a lot for me. So I'm really aware about that. And I'm okay with telling my team right now, like, I really can't take on a training that focuses on grief, because I'm still dealing with so much of my own, that if I get up there as a trainer, I'm just going to be like bubbling with tears. And I think this may be an opportunity for someone else to take it, because I'm just not in that place yet where I can do that. But it's also having awareness of your staff. I could often tell just by nonverbal cues of how my staff were doing. And it's within minutes of like the start of the day. For instance, if like my normal bubbly girl, if she was really quiet, or her door was closed, or she wasn't being goofy, I knew something was up. Or I knew, like, if my really quiet worker was like talking a million miles a minute, they have a lot going on, and they probably need to be brought in and like, hey, what's going on and what can I help you with? Because that was often a sign that there's a lot on her plate, and she needed probably support and help in navigating through and prioritizing a lot. So as leaders, just having an understanding of the personalities we are working with, knowing what is going on with their lives, outside or even in the community, knowing what is going on in the community. I know in Indian country, when something happens to an individual, it's not just to that individual, it's to the entire community. Like within like 20-30 minutes of something occurring, there's people at their house, there's casseroles coming in, there's medicines coming in, there's wood being dropped off, whatever it is that people think the community needs. We act in that relationship-based way. But it's important to have an understanding too, that with trauma, having an understanding of what's going on, just always having awareness of that. And it's also extremely important to have healthy boundaries and relationships. I don't know how many times that I've been asked to take on a case, and I would just be honest and say, I am not the best person for this because I have an outside relationship. Therefore, that can, it just can come into play in a way that may not be in a good way, whether or not it's because that person may expect more of me because I'm close to their family, or maybe it's because whatever reason, but it's just being able to have those boundaries and being able to say, you know, I'm not the right person for this, but you know what, Kimee is fantastic and I know that she'll do a great job, and she has more of, she doesn't have those issues to be concerned with. And being able to also recognize and understand that, you know, when we work, especially with families for a long time, it could go many ways. And one way I've seen with workers is, you know, like a worker can get burnt out on a family, or, you know, like what had happened in the past is, you know, is not necessary, you know, instead of being focused on what's happening in the present, they're more into what happened in the past. And being able just to remind them that, you know, we need to be focused on today and work from where we are today. But there's also, if you worked with families for a long time, I've gotten very attached to my kids. And to be able to sometimes say, hey, I know like I'm overprotective of, you know, this youth necessarily. Kimee, can you also come with me just to kind of keep me in check, or to make sure that, you know, like, though, you know, I'm not overstepping certain boundaries, or, you know, it's just being able to have those healthy boundaries and to have those checks in place as well. And as a supervisor, just keeping a watch on those. Next slide.
So I hope that if you guys had any questions during the session, you're putting those in the chat. If not, on the last slide, we'll have our email addresses, and you're more than welcome to reach out to Lisa and I. We'd love to answer any questions you have, and we hope to see you in part 2. I'm gonna kick it over to Jackie because she has some information she'd like to share.
Yeah, before folks start going on with their day, I just want to mention first, just to say thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned at the start of this, we have a part 2 coming up on May 18th, so be sure to register. But I also want to just take a minute and share that we really, truly at the Capacity Building Center for Tribes value and listen to your feedback and input, especially on these webinars. We're now doing podcasts too, but one of the things we've learned in these webinars is that you all would love more time to talk, more time to dialogue, just about some of the content shared, and perhaps even be able to ask more questions of the presenters that you may or may not have felt comfortable in. So with that, we are offering what we are calling Mada Unidua. It's on April 20th, and we gave it a name because sometimes in our names, it's almost like giving it a purpose, giving it a spirit, having some intent behind it. So on April 20th, we want to offer to all of you participants a time to come back together and talk more with our presenters. We're looking at perhaps going through some of the questions that they provided to us and just digging a little bit deeper. So please join us. We have a registration for that time together to kind of walk through this a little bit more, talk with your peers, your tribal peers during that time. So again, we'll have that link in the chat room for you all. One last thing, I want to say that we're going to put the QR code. So speaking of evaluations, we want to make sure that if you could just take a moment, perhaps scan that QR code. I think Sarah or somebody will get that in there for us. And do the evaluation so we again can learn and then also apply to part 2 that's coming up. That would be great. So with that, there she has it in the link for you. I want to say thank you, Chimigwech, to Lisa and Kimee and Esther and Sarah. This has been wonderful. I think we can never hear enough about how we take care of ourselves and how we address trauma and how we work with our families. So Chimigwech and all the participants out there, may you have ease in your day. Take care, everybody.
Mado, bye. Jackie, they mentioned in the chat that the link wasn't working to the session 2, so maybe we might check that before we send it out.
Okay. Esther sent us a link, so we'll check her emails and go to that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.